If you're trying to communicate the gospel to anybody, you need to know what their idols are. Because the gospel is you're saved by grace, and the idol is you're saved by something else. And it's one thing to say, oh, you know, you're saved by grace, you're not justified by works. But you realize how many different forms of works there are? Do you realize how many different forms of works righteousness there really are out there? And unless you know what form you're talking to, how do you know how to apply the gospel to it? Let me give you 3 kinds of idols that you have to expose: personal idols, religious idols, and cultural idols. Okay? We could spend a lot of time on this. Maybe we will. Personal idols. Let me give you just 3. Every individual, and that means every individual, Christian or not, because we sinners, we don't want to believe that we're justified by grace. We don't want to rely on God and on Christ for our salvation, so we're going to rely on something else. Any life that's not built on God's glory and His grace is going to be built on the deification of something else. It's going to be built on turning something else into a pseudo-savior, some way in which you save yourself without having to go to God, so you think you're keeping control of your life, but you're really not. Romans 1 says that's really the form of how sin works itself out in everybody's life anyway. It's always idolatry. Romans 1 is pretty remarkable about that, since it's talking about sin in general, in the whole human race, and basically says idolatry is at the essence of all sin. Let me give you 3 personal idols. One is the one that's actually dealt with here: money. You know, Colossians 3, oh, by the way, Artemis ended up becoming, in a sense, the goddess of business. It's because Artemis was the goddess of the moon, of the hunt, and also of fertility. And because she was a goddess of fertility, that made her associated with fertility of the ground, and therefore of good harvest, and therefore of financial prosperity. And on top of that, you saw there was a reference to this by the city clerk. A meteorite fell to earth near Ephesus. Many people thought the meteorite looked like a statue of Artemis, though a lot of other people didn't, but that didn't matter. And therefore, hey, we have a statue. I mean, gosh, she sent us her own image. And so they set it up, and they created the temple of Artemis, or the temple of Diana, which was 7 times bigger than the Parthenon, and was one of the wonders of the ancient world. And everybody wanted to come see the meteorite. Everybody wanted to come see the size of this thing. And it became a Disney World of the ancient world. It became an enormous tourist attraction. And as a result, because of all the commercialism that went around it, the temple became fabulously rich, and Ephesus became a business center. Became a financial center. And Artemis became the goddess of business. And if you wanted to make a lot of money, you sacrificed to her. And you served her, and you honored her. You see, what they're afraid of is if you don't have enough, if people aren't honoring Artemis, you know, our whole economy might collapse, both literally and because they're not going to be buying our statuettes. But not only that, but perhaps it means, you know, we're not honoring her, then business is going to go down. Isn't that awful? Sacrifice to, and very often there was child sacrifice. Listen, I live in an Ephesus called New York City. Let me press this home a little bit. You know, I know this is going to be really shocking when I tell you this, but you know, all over New York City, there's the practice of child sacrifice. Because see, the goddess of business in New York City, if you want to get in the financial world, make a lot of money, you have to sacrifice your family. The jobs are set up that way. The work is structured that way. You have to sacrifice your family. You will not be a good father or mother. You can't be. And that's what you do. If you're going to get the money, if you're going to get the power that comes, you have to sacrifice to the goddess. And you know, to be a Christian, do we want to say, and this is the thing that we face, you know, in New York City, if you're a Christian, do we want to say, oh, okay, as a Christian, no Christians in the financial world? I don't think we want to say that. I don't think that's great. I think we need to say every single part of the world is Jesus' part of the world. And making money is not intrinsically wrong, and finance is not intrinsically wrong. It can be a great thing. And yet for Christians to walk into a place that's dominated by this God, this idol, that demands child sacrifice, is really tough. How do you get in there and still do your job and not, you know, take the, did I do that? How do you get into your job and not bow down? In other words, how do you make money just money? How do you demythologize it? So it's not Artemis, the goddess. How do you demythologize? So it's not your identity, so it's not your main value, it's not your salvation. It's just money. How do you do that? Only with the gospel. We'll get back to that.